Friday's report of last week is actually going to come in as a miss. And here's the issue with that. Nobody cares. Welcome, everybody. I am your host for this Crashes and Taxes podcast, Rebecca Walser. So glad you could be with me today. I want to take this first payroll report that we got from December in the second week of January, and I want to just dissect it. And because I think that, there's a couple of issues that happen with this particular payroll report, and it kind of just needs to get highlighted. I've talked about it multiple prints last year. And it's just a continuing pattern from BLS, which is highly unusual, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so I want to just quickly touch on this week and then let you know that we'll be looking out at this trend and bringing you the real revised numbers as they come out. Now, this is a live report that comes out at 8:30 on the Friday after the end of the month. And the market, it definitely moves the market. So on Friday, I was actually doing the Romo show from Fox News in New York, and we got the live print, and there was a panel. And the initial top line number looks really positive. So it looks like a major beat. We were expecting 170,000, really 167,000, and it went up to 170,000 the night before the report was released because of the ADP payroll report. And then we got 216,000. So I want to share my screen with you because there's an excellent article that I think there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, but most of you are never going to see this article because it's just not something that is going to be, something that you're really privy to, and you probably don't have a publication for it. I can see on Finance Girl 77. But this is an excellent article that came out on Friday to really talk about the payroll report. Now, a lot of people initially the market turned red. And the reason the market turned red, and there's all kinds of bad news in the last couple of years has been good news. Why has it been good news? Well, if you got bad news, it was good news because it meant that the Federal Reserve was going to react a certain way, or they were going to be more stimulative or more accommodative in their monetary policy, either cutting rates or not raising rates. And so bad news was actually viewed by the market as good news because they knew that the Fed would act appropriately regarding the bad news. Here's the situation. It's the exact opposite. We're getting better than expected news. Like I said, the headline was 216,000 when we were expecting to get 170. Zero had just given a consensus of 175. And basically, it's above all but two of the 67 Wall Street estimates that make up the Bloomberg survey. So here you can actually see the total U.S. employees non-farm payrolls net change last, and you can see we've got 216,000 for this December of 2023. And so what we're trying to then say, and then Zero Hedge goes on and says, we are comfortable projecting, though, that today's number is going to be sharply revised lower, meaning that Friday's report last week is actually going to come in as a miss. And here's the issue with that. Nobody cares. The market doesn't do anything on the misses. So what that means is BLS can present and report a great number, a top headline number that totally blows away expectations, that then sends the market in a certain trajectory, and yet they can come back a month later and completely revise the number down. And I want you to see here what I'm sharing with you, that is exactly what they did. They revised not just the previous month, November, down, and they revised it down over 10% from under 200,000 down to 173. So they revised it down literally almost 30% off of what they had originally reported. A 30% wrong number is not okay. It's like going from 100 to a 70. It's a completely different score. And if you look at October, they also revised October down. They revised October down 45,000 from 150. That's almost a 33% adjustment down. So what's happened in the last 11 months of reports 10 of them have been revised substantially lower, not just a little bit lower, not just, oops, we got this one estimate on retail wrong after the final numbers came in. No, no, no. These are being substantially revised lower. You can actually see the blue is the actual economic release. The red is the the orange is, or the brown, I don't know what you call it on this, is basically the last. And then the green is the total month over month net change. And you can see how all of these reds are indicating that they had massive negative adjustments to the downside. And if BLS got a tap on shoulders being literally corn popped by Biden, this is what the Zero Hedges is a direct quote. Every other metric came in laughably strong in October. Basically, Zero Hedges going out and starting to state now almost publicly, and I think they actually are, that literally everything has been so massaged to look positive that this report has now become political. And they are pointing out the different metrics. They're saying that basically we expected it to tick up to 3.8 and not miss and stay at 3.7. The unemployment rates for adult men, adult women, teenagers, whites, blacks, Asians, and Hispanics showed little change. And then you can see, here's where I'm talking about. They're basically calling this a political report, confirming the political nature of today's report. The unemployment rate among Black workers actually tumbled last month to 5.2%, down 0.6%, while the unemployment unemployment rose to 3.5, up. That usual narrative is when the labor market starts turning late in the economic cycle, the Black community is the first and the hardest hit. And there's no indication of that here. There was some unexpected weakness in the labor force participation rate, which actually dropped 62 to 62.5 from 62.8, missing expectations of that being stable and unchanged. And what that represents is that the people that are not seeking work, that are working age people, soared from just under 100 million to, a half of, 540,000 more than 100 million. It was an 845,000 increase in people that are not seeking employment. And this was a change to historical data. So again, just like the CPI number went from 2-year reads to 1-year reads so that it could make it look less bad in 2023 to compare it to 2022 versus 2021, as it previously had been. We got that change in January of last year. We can see that they're now changing the way they historically look at those that are not in the labor force. And then you've got something more remarkable, which was wages. They were not expected by many to drop, but they came in hot, meaning they actually rose 0.4% above the 0.3% estimate and rose 4.1% from 4.1, which basically took away the expectations of a decline as wage growth appears here to stay. If you look at a little bit deeper into the report, and again, Zero Hedges literally calling this quite a bit of total not truthfulness here. Besides the endless downward revisions that we've already discussed, the usual split between the household and establishment surveys has increased. And that is showing that what's happening is the payroll survey shows an increase of 216,000, at least until it's revised down lower, as we mentioned. However, the household survey showed a plunge in unemployment of 683,000. So we have two surveys that are actually happening, one by establishments and the other by households. And the household survey showed a huge discrepancy that we didn't get 216,000 jobs added. No. We actually lost 683,000 jobs. So let's look at some of the details from that report. It shows that the number of persons employed part-time for economic reasons at 4.2 changed little, but was up 333,000 for the year. So these individuals want full-time employment, but they're working part-time because their hours have been reduced or they've been unable to find full-time jobs. The number of persons not in the labor force who wanted a job edged to 5.7 million and was up 514,000 in the last year. These individuals are not counted as employed because they're not actively looking for work during the 4 weeks preceding the survey. And then among those in the labor force who wanted a job, the number of persons marginally attached to the labor force changed very little at 1.6 million, but was up over 306,000 for the year. These individuals wanted work and had looked for a job, but had not looked for work in the 4 weeks prior to the survey. So in other words, these are discouraged workers. There are a subset of them marginally attached, and they believe there's no jobs for them. And there's 346 of those. But when we drill deeper, we find that by segment, the traditional growth in this job report of 216,000 is in really three sectors: government, leisure, health, and healthcare. And so basically, these are the lowest paying jobs, with the exception of potentially government. These are the lowest paying jobs. You can see here, government employment increased by 52,000, which made that entire report be a headline number that was better than expectations. Government added an average of 56,000 jobs per month last year, which is more than double their average of 23,000 in 2022. So it's almost like the government was like, we can't have these reports look bad when the Federal Reserve is going to be raising rates. We've got to show that unemployment is stable and it will allow us to have a soft landing. So we've really just had a terrible amount of reports, terrible reports, I'd say, for 2023. And it's almost like give Powell the runway he needed to really increase the rates as fast as he did. You can see in December, healthcare jobs, 38,000 added. These are ambulance jobs and hospital jobs. And that average basically came in a little bit higher, about 9,000 higher monthly than I did the year before. You've got employment and social assistance or social workers, 21,000. You've got construction up 17,000. Transportation and warehouses declined 23,000. We had 40,000 hospitality and leisure, which is one of our lowest payers. Retail changed little with 17,000. That's still an increase over December, which is interesting because it is January after the holidays. Usually get some layoffs. So it's interesting that retail still went up. And then you've got professional athletes. So basically, the biggest shocker, and one that Zero Hedge says you won't hear anywhere else, is the number of full-time jobs actually has plunged 1.5 million in December to the lowest level since February of last year, while part-time jobs exploded 762,000, the highest on record. And there's another record, and it's not a good record. It's the number of multiple job holders. So basically, what the report said and what I was able to really glean from, and I'll stop sharing now, what the report said and what I was able to really glean live when the report came out and I was in New York was that we're seeing now are people that don't have a living wage with their one job, and therefore they are having to hold multiple jobs. And this is the reason that besides the BLS and whatever data manipulation has been going on really for most of 2023 that we can see, and looks like it might continue for 2024, the BLS numbers are just no longer reliable, and that they do sway the market. They do give Powell a runway. And yet when they are off by 30 to 50%, there's not even a market discussion or reaction. So at what point is the market going to continue to accept that we're getting such inaccurate government data that is used to manage monetary policy in a large sense? A couple of other negatives I just kind of want to point out this week that we are looking at. Obviously, we want to look at the ISM manufacturing, purchase manufacturers index, PMI, and that is still contracting. It's at its lowest level since July of 2020, coming in at 47.4. The thing to know about that report is anytime you're under 50, you're actually contracting. So anything above 50 is expansion. Anything sub 50 is contractionary. We're at big contractionary numbers here at 47.4, which is, like I said, the lowest amount since July of 2020. And that was, of course, right after we went into lockdown in March, April of 2020. So that's right when we're in the middle of the pandemic lockdown. So that is extremely alarming, considering that's where our manufacturing level is at now. And that's pandemic level contraction. Our labor and borrowing costs go up. We have a 2-year peaking in mid-November. And what I would just also say is that we know that BRICS now has expanded by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and we're seeing demand for crude drop substantially, and that is a leading indicator that consumers don't have the money to spend, that now they're probably starting to get their bills from their buy now, pay later. We know that $220 billion was purchased in America between November 1st and December 31st on a buy now, pay later, $222 billion in a 2-month window. And those bills are going to be coming due. And usually these bills, I'm trying to think of some of the names. You guys would recognize them if you're checking out for airlines, if you're checking out for a card online, you're going to see, I think it's Afterpay, and there's a couple of different ones, Klarna. They allow you to basically finance it in 3 to 4 installments. So you're talking about these bills are going to be due over these next couple of months in Q1, and they're definitely going to give the retail consumer a little bit of a problem with basically continuing to consume. So we have a consumption problem. We have a demand problem. We don't have enough reserves in the tank to keep everything going. We did see a massive shift to cash the first week of January, and I think that's simply a matter of the fact that the market and the Mag 7 was starting to show signs of weakness. Apple being downgraded twice last week. A lot of the other things that are happening with the big tech Mag 7 partners. There's a lot of antitrust litigation. Not that we've really had any serious antitrust litigation in over a decade or more. But if you look at Apple, the FTC just in October of this year ruled that Apple did in fact infringe on Massimo's patented pulse oximeter inside of their Apple Watch. And so as a result of that, the Apple Watch is now banned in the United States from being sold. Series 6 and on, and all of the Ultra. The Apple Watch rather, is not being sold right now because of this patent infringement antitrust litigation that the FTC ruled on, and the Biden administration has upheld and not gone after. So we've got Apple with their watch not being sold. We've got with a big problem in China. They're not going to get the growth there that they thought. So they've already seen Apple downgraded. With Google, we have litigation moving forward, 46 states. I'm going to talk about Meta as well, but 46 states, and the FTC is going after Meta. And basically that was initiated during the Trump administration around Meta acquiring both WhatsApp and Instagram. And the Trump administration put forth and promulgated that this is basically a monopoly of social media. That case was dismissed. Biden's new FTC chair brought the case again, and now it is not being dismissed. This time it is moving forward. We expect trial on that starting next month even. So that's happening. We also have the Apple with the Fortnite. That's an antitrust case of Apple basically getting a 30% commission on all in-app purchases that are downloaded from the Apple App Store. So you have that litigation. And then with Google, you have litigation with Alphabet, which is Google's parent, that basically says it's anti-competitive because they are basically buying off their competitors in order for their competitors to carry Google as their default search engine. So you have a lot of headway with some of the texts on antitrust litigation, which is really interesting because we haven't really had serious litigation. But like I said, Apple is being affected even as we speak right now. So you saw a really broad shift to cash last week as people started to get a little bit nervous that the Mag 7 was pulling back so much in the first week of 2024. And so that obviously had an impact. But I think that this jobs report has pretty much fooled the masses. Certainly Wall Street has fooled the masses once again and said, everything is great, everything is fine. Isn't this wonderful? And as we start to peel back the layers and look at the real data, and we look at manufacturing, we look at ISM PMI, we see that we are in such a contraction level. We pair that with Germany that we know is in depression level contraction from manufacturing. So that will follow the EU. We've got problems in the UK. And then we have all of this sort of popping off on the geopolitical side with Saudi Arabia and UAE and Iran joining a BRICS effective this month. We're really just on eggshells with what could happen geopolitically to really pop off this economy more. But there is definitely a concerted effort on government data to help this current administration at a level that we have never observed before in the past, and that I have never seen. And for a group like Zero Hedge to point out that these these prints now are becoming kind of just completely untruthful. I don't know how else to say it correctly. It's really starting to become alarming that we could be getting economic data that is quite manipulated, and that is going to be a problem for all economists that track government data and do surveys and consensuses. And we will have to see where that takes us and where that heads. So I just wanted to do a quick podcast on that December jobs report and let you guys remember, always be cautious. But I will say, let's just pretend for a second that this was a really great and strong labor report. This would be problematic for the market, which is expecting 6 cuts. The dot plot for the Fed only shows really 3. But again, the market is once again ahead of itself, pricing in 6 cuts, pricing in cuts fast as early as March, which I think is not going to happen. And if it were a real report and this were really the state of the U.S. Labor economy, then I think you're going to see Powell is going to have a little bit more of a difficult time really starting to cut rates because, a great and hot job market is still inflationary in its effect on the economy. So if you still potentially have some hot pockets of inflation, i.e. your job market, which is one of your 2 biggest, your cost of capital and your labor, those are our 2 mandates for the Fed. And so if this number is to be really, truly accepted, hook, line, sinker at face value, this again kind of paints Powell into a corner, backs him into a corner because he's basically given this indication that where he's going to shift policy back to accommodative, back to lower cost of capital. And yet this jobs report still indicates that we could have a kind of a potentially overheated economy. I don't buy it. So I think that it is absolutely a report that's been made to look good. But I do think that we need to be aware that it could make it harder for Powell to begin his rate cut track and get on it. So, there's just a lot going on. This is going to be a very big year of disruption. It's been kind of surprising to many economists how long this economy has kind of kept going. But you can kind of see as the nuances of data come in and we see that there's a lot of manipulation of data, you can see how this economy has been manipulated to believe a certain narrative, to follow a certain route. And I think that this 2024 is when those narratives end and we really will see the truth behind the subterfuge and obfuscation that has really been going on for quite some time. So until next Crashes and Taxes, take care, everybody. Have a great week. And just be aware that something is going on. Take care.